Things are going really well for ECU and Mike Houston, and the 10 guys returning this year have some work to do, but it's still a program that is in a better place than they were when Houston originally took over. We take a look at some of these players that are going to help out, and it seems that the Pirates are in good hands as long as Houston stays on campus. First guy we're talking about wide receiver, and that's a group that was really fun to watch last year. Josiah Hatfield has explosive potential. It's just a matter of him stepping up and playing a bigger role. Only 11 catches last year, but he produced 178 yards, good for 16.2 yards per catch. He has had explosive plays in the past. He is someone who can be a big time playmaker for this offense. They're going to need that with Holton Nailor's gone at quarterback. This is a group that was okay last year at times, but they were also extremely explosive. You look at they finished 16th in the country in yards per game. That's a group that can be really explosive. They finished 18th in yards per play as an offense, 6.6 yards per play last year. I really liked what they did, but they lose quite a bit of talent. Now, how this new talent takes over. Now, obviously, a lot of that stems from what does the quarterback do, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this offense has the playmakers, and Hatfield is one of those guys that could be that explosive weapon that this offense really needs. And the defense is kind of the same way. They were a group that wasn't as good last year, and so they went out and got some players to kind of help with that. Linebacker BJ Davis comes in from the transfer portal and was very productive in his time before he came to ECU. Look at last year alone, 94 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 interceptions. He is someone who can be a big time playmaker as long as he handles the transition to the FBS level. I think that this group, this defense, needs to be better. They just simply do. There's no question about it. If you're looking at a reason why ECU takes a step forward, is because their defense improves slightly, not even a ton. You look at total yards per game, they finished 91st. Yards per play allowed, 114th. Passing yards allowed per game, 130th. This was a group that was not very good at times last year, and that's something they need to improve. That's something that they need to get better, because if you can't improve defensively, it's going to be a long year. And even though it's a new AAC, there's still plenty of offenses that can make you hurt. Now, another position that is going to be in question for now, they have plenty of talent, is running back. And Gerald Green is coming in from Georgia Southern after a fairly productive career, over 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns with the Eagles. He adds to a group that must replace Keaton Mitchell. I don't think anybody on this roster is Keaton Mitchell. Nobody has that explosive playmaking ability, and nobody has the speed, really, is more what it is. The speed and explosiveness that he played with is unmatched. And maybe you have one of those guys, but they're not going to be as good as Keaton Mitchell was. Now, they have plenty of options, and Gerald Green is one of them. And at times, Gerald Green was expected to be the guy for Georgia Southern. And that is something that ECU hopes that they're getting in this guy when he comes to campus. Now, this rushing attack was right down the middle for the most part, 54th in yards per game. And I think that it could be better. Now, a lot of that has to do with the offensive line, and it's an offensive line that is going to have to replace guys like Avery Jones. That is definitely not going to be easy, but if they are able to do that and the rushing attack takes a step forward, that takes a lot of pressure off that passing attack. Now, we mentioned pressure and groups that need to take a step forward. The defense, like we said, is one of those groups, but guys like Chad Stevens really flew under the radar. I don't think we talk about them enough. Talk about Chad Stevens and what he did. 10 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks. He has the ability to be disruptive on the edge, and that's something that this group could improve upon. Now, they are fairly average in terms of sacks and tackles for loss, but Chad Stevens showed that he could be a force on the edge. Now, whether they have him as a stand-up edge rusher or if they move him back to be a stand-up linebacker, we'll see. You'll probably see him on the line, and for good reason. You look at the production he had last year, and it's easy to see why this defense could take a step forward, but you never know. And the talent they have returning, there are some guys that are all conference type talent, but then the depth is where this becomes a concern. And if Chad Stevens can be even better than he was last year, then I like this group a little bit more. Now, flipping back, we talked about the running back position. Marlon Gunn Jr. could be a lot higher on this list. We'll see what happens this year. 344 yards, 5.1 yards per carry. He is someone who I think a lot of people are excited about. and he has explosive playmaking ability, maybe not to the level of Keaton Mitchell. He was a kick returner last year, so he has, you don't put any slow people back on kick return. He is someone that can be a fast player and make big plays for this offense. It's just a matter of, can they put it all together? Is he a go-to guy? And that's going to help a guy like quarterback Mason Garcia, who takes over for the legend Holton Ahlers. You look at what Holton Ahlers did for ECU in his career, and it's not going to be easy, and no one should try to replace him. Garcia should not try to be Ahlers, and really, they're not going to be that similar. I think that Garcia is more of the passing type, maybe not going to be as much of a runner as Ahlers was, although Ahlers did throw the ball quite a bit, as evidenced by his stats. But I think Mason Garcia needs to just be Mason Garcia. You're not going to try to be Holton Ahlers. That's not going to go well for you. And with the talent you have returning, it should be easy to be yourself. Another player that's going to help in that regard is RAHJAI Harris. Again, this running back group is deep. That's one thing they have going for them. And that RAHJAI Harris is former AAC Freshman of the Year, and he's someone who maybe not as explosive as some of these other guys, but he is someone who can pick up tough yards. He has the vision to be able to make big plays and run the ball efficiently. You just have to see it. You also have to see him stay on the field, and you have to find touches, because again, with Harris, Gunn, and Green, there aren't going to be as many touches to go around. And that's worse than it was last year, when it was mostly just Keaton Mitchell that you were competing with. So now you have to find ways to get the football in your hands, and you have to be efficient when that happens. Another guy that could take a step forward is wide receiver JAYLEN Johnson. 340 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. I think he's set for a breakout season for the Pirates, and that would be huge for Mason Garcia. It's all about chemistry too. Can they find some chemistry together? Can they work together to be even better, and make sure that the fall off from Holton Ahlers isn't as great? Because Mason Garcia is essentially starting brand new. He has some experience, but he is trying to figure things out on the fly for the most part. And he has a lot of potential on this offense. It's just a matter of, does this group take a step forward? Now, the defense I mentioned before has some really talented, really exciting players. And Jeremy Lewis is one of those guys. A linebacker, had 8.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 60 tackles last year. He is a productive playmaker for this defense, and at times made some pretty clutch plays as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. This defense has to take a step forward. There's too much volatility in this group. Now, they did do really well against the run. They finished 19th against the run last year. So there wasn't all bad things, and it wasn't all terrible, because they were down the middle of the road, but there's too many things that were really bad that needs to get fixed. And Jeremy Lewis returns to help fix that. Now, obviously, the transfer portal did some damage to that group, but that's why you bring in guys like BJ Davis. You bring in other players from the transfer portal that will help with that as well. Now, a player who will also help on the back end is safety Julius Wood, one of my favorite players in the AAC, someone who has been a solid producer last year for the ECU Pirates. You look at 87 tackles, 4 passes defended, 2 interceptions. The secondary is really where you're going to need to see some improvement, because you lost quite a bit of talent with Jerry Wilson and Malik Fleming both leaving. Julius Wood returns. Tegan Wilk is also back. So I think that this secondary can be better than it was last year. A team that finished 130th in passing yards per game, you got to find a way to figure that out. You have to fix that, because this is a league that's going to throw the football. There's a ton of talented teams that are coming in, a ton of talented and explosive offenses that you will need to stop. And finishing 130th and passing is not going to get the job done. But this is a group that's still really exciting. ECU has a lot of things to work on, and it probably is going to be a step back for them this year. But the real question of where Mike Houston's program is going to be is, how do they do this year? Can they make it back to a bowl game? Because we all know that this should be a step back year. Well, if they make a bowl game, we know that they're in a good place. We are raising that floor, which is what you want to see from this program. You want to see that they may not be where they want to be, but they are not where they used to be either. This is not a team that is at the bottom of the conference anymore. This is a program that is taking steps in the right direction. And it's tough to say finishing 6-6 should be the goal, but if they're able to do that, it means that Mike Houston has elevated this program to a level that they need to be. And that's really what you want to see. And if they're able to do that, I'm really excited about the future of ECU. I already am with Mike Houston, and it's just a matter of how long does he stick around and what can he turn this program into in the long run.